What up? Winbush here, and today I'm excited to show you guys how to make this. So I'm excited to announce that I'm actually an Epic partner now, and what this entails is every couple of weeks, Epic is actually going to sponsor a video where I make these logo animations, and then I'm going to give you a breakdown on how exactly I created them. And so in this first video, which I'm calling Naturalistic, I'm going to show you guys how I made that scene. I'm using Cinema 4D, Illustrator, Unreal Engine, and I wrap everything up in After Effects. And so without further ado, let's jump right into it. So first I'm going to get started here in Illustrator and show you how to bring it from a flat vector into Cinema 4D to make it 3D. So as you can see here, I have my Unreal logo. For right now, I'm just going to show you guys how to bring in the circle and the U. So I'm just going to come over to File, Save As, and then I'm just going to find where I want to put it. So I'm going to put it in the new folder here, Unreal Naturalistic. I made an AI folder, and I'm just going to name this one Unreal Top _ 3D. And then I'm going to click Save. And then we have this box come up for Illustrator options. As always, whenever we want to bring stuff from Illustrator into Cinema 4D, we have to use version Illustrator 8. I'm not sure why this is still the case, but these are the steps we need to take to make this 3D. So I'm going to click OK, and then I'm just going to click OK again. And then I'm free to close out Illustrator. So now I'm going to open up Cinema 4D. So I have Cinema 4D opened up right now, and I'm using version R21 for this example. And so the first step that I want to do is come over to the Objects tab over here in the top right, click on File, and then click on Merge Object here. And then from here, I'm just going to find that Illustrator file that I made. So I'm going to go to my IE folder and click this one right here, click Open. And then I'm just going to leave everything as is right here. I think right for this example, I'm leaving my scale at 1. I'm going to have connected splines not on. And I'll show you why in a minute, but I'm also going to group my splines here. So I'm going to click OK. And then as I open this up, you can see that it brought in a lot more splines than initially thought. But first, I want to click on this right here, and then I'm going to click on my coordinates panel, and I'm actually going to zero everything out just so we're in direct center like so. So now that I have everything in direct center of my screen, I'm going to click on this just to make this a little bit larger. So I'm going to bring this up to around 17 by 17. And then on Z, I'm just going to leave it at 1 because I don't really need it to extend it. So I just wanted to use X and Y coordinates here. And then I'm just going to kind of zoom in here just so I could get a better view of how I'm working. And so what I like to do from here is I kind of like separating all my splines just because I'm going to be turning these on and off. As you can see, like we should only have about 3 splines in here, but for whatever reason, it gave us a lot more. So I'm just going to start turning these off and then just go through here and kind of see the splines that I want to keep, which it looks like I want to keep 1, 3, and 4 because that's giving us what we want. So I can come up here and just delete this. And then I'm just going to find the ones that have my outer circle. So it looks like 3 and 4. So I need to merge these together so that I can actually make these into a 3D object here and have it extrude. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key, make sure I have 3 and 4 selected. And then I'm going to right click and then come down here to where it says Connect Objects plus Delete. And click on that, and then that lets me have my object here so that I can extrude it later. So now that we have our splines and everything set to go, now the next step is to extrude it. So in order to do that, I'm going to come up here in my top panel up here, click on this icon here, and then look for the extrude. So I'm going to click on that, and I think I'll start with the U first. And actually, instead of path 1, I'm just going to rename this U. And then I'm just going to rename this one circle so I know exactly which spline is what. And then I'm going to take the U and bring it underneath extrude. And you can see now that we have extrusion on our U. But it's like, I don't really like everything just being hard edge. We kind of want to have like a bevel in there just to kind of smooth it out and add that added production value in there. And so in order to do that, I'm going to click on extrude here again. And then I'm going to come over to caps. And down here in version R21 and up, we actually are able to load in some presets now, which are pretty nice. So I'm going to click on load presets here. And I'm actually going to use this one right here. So the basic rounding, just going to click on this, and you can see that it extruded it a little bit here. So if I come over to my display, then come down here so we can kind of see the lines and everything, you can see that we have a nice little bevel in here, but it's not exactly the way that I wanted it. I wanted it on the edges here. So in order to do that, I'm just going to come down to here where it says bevel outside, click on this. And now you can see that it's making it fat around the edges. And so from here, I'm just going to kind of lower my size down. First, I'm just gonna add a little bit more segments here just to make it a little bit more smooth. And then on my size, I could bring it down to like 3 or 2. Let's see what it looks like at 2. And then I'm just gonna take the lines off here so we can see. So now we have a nice bevel on the edges and everything, and our logo is starting to look really nice. And so the next step from here is really easy. We can pretty much just like hold down the left control key, just click and drag to make a copy. And then I could delete the spline from here. And then I'm just going to take the circle spline, drop it in there. So now we have our Unreal logo. It's all extruded out. And so from here, if I look, you can see, especially on the circle on the outside, it's not exactly round. And there's an easy way for me to fix this. Like if I click on the spline here, and right here where you see, you have to click on the object tag. And then right here where you see intermediate points, instead of adaptive, I like to go to natural. And then I'm just going to up the number of segments here to say like 50. And now you can see that it's more smoothed out and it really looks nice here. I'm going to do the same thing on the U. I'm going to come over to natural, click on number here, make this 50. And I think we have our good logo here. So the point of this breakdown is to just walk you through the major steps. And so I don't want to bore you with all the letters and everything. I'm going to take us to the next step where I actually have a lot of the scene already built out and show you some cool tricks there as well. So this is the scene with everything put together. I followed the same exact steps that I had before, just to, finish out the Unreal Engine part here. And then I took the liberty of just animating the spin here. So if I look at my big U and circle, if I just come over here to the coordinates here, you can see all I'm doing is really rotating it on the H. So I just have a nice spin on there. And that's it there. And then what I want to do now is I want to animate these down here, but instead of doing it individually on each one like I did for the U and the circle, there's actually a way that I could kind of bring this into not really a MoGraph cloner, but a fracture, so that I could still use like the random effector so that I can animate this with only 2 keyframes and I have all the letters animated. Let me show you how. So if I come over here where it says MoGraph, and instead of using cloner, I want to come down to here where it says fracture. Now I'm going to click on this, and then I'm going to click all the letters for Unreal Engine down here. And I'm just going to click and drag these under my fracture. And so when I click on fracture, what this is going to allow me to do is, you see we have a tab here for effectors. So what we could do here is actually bring in some of our effectors on our fracture, and it's going to manipulate it just as if it was in a MoGraph cloner, but we're not making clones. We're going to work with what we have here. And so the next step from here is I'm going to go back to the MoGraph tab, come down to effector, and I'm actually going to pick a random effector like so. So there we go. I have a random effector on here, and you can already see it's starting to manipulate our letters down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to zero out my position for right now. And then I'm also going to turn on rotation because I want to have these animating on and rotating as they're coming into position. So I'm just going to start at the beginning here. And actually, let me come out maybe to like 180. And I'm just going to make keyframes for my X, Y, and Z position. And then my rotation H, I'm going to have a keyframe here. So this is going to be like our landing point. And then if I go back to the first frame here, I can actually start manipulating these here. So for my X, I think I did about 1954. I have these written down on a notepad. So I did -37 for the Y, and for the Z, I did 1524. And I'm just going to click this so it selects all these, and then I'm going to make a keyframe. And then for my rotation H, I did 1000, like so. Now if I click play, you can see now we have all the letters coming into place along with our circle spinning up top. And so once we have like a dynamic camera move and everything, this is going to look a lot more cooler. But I wanted to show you guys that because I thought that was cool how we could use the fracture with, the different effectors and everything to animate our scene with only 2 keyframes. So now that we have our cool animation and everything going on with our logo, I want to start bringing in textures, but I'm only going to use textures just as like a temporary placeholder because I'm actually going to texture everything once we get into Unreal. This is kind of the workflow that I've been developing over the past year, and it seems to really be working out. So what I'm going to do is down here in the lower left-hand corner, just double click, and I'm just going to make a generic texture. So I'm just going to name this one U. I'm going to double click again. I'm just going to name this one circle. And then double click again, just name these one letters. And then I'm just going to correlate them with the extrusion up here. So I'm going to bring this one to my big U, bring this one to circle, and then I can bring this one over to the fracture. And now I have a material placed on all these. So once I bring this into Unreal, I can actually start replacing out the materials with, like Megascan materials or stuff that we actually find in the marketplace. And speaking of Megascans, one of the things that I like to do inside Cinema 4D to get my scene all set up is kind of block it out in Cinema, and then I start really polishing it once I get into Unreal. So I'm only going to bring over maybe like 1 or 2 assets from Megascans. And to get started with that, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to find Bridge, which you can download for free off the Quixel.com. If you have an Epic account, you can use all this stuff 100% free. But I'm going to come down to local where I have my stuff already downloaded. And I believe I already know which one I have, so I can actually search for it. Yeah, so I'm using this one right here, the Quarry Cliff section detail. And I'm just going to come over here. If you don't know how to access this stuff, make sure you go to my channel and check some of my previous videos where I really break this down. So all I'm going to do is click on the export tab here. And then I'm going to make sure I have everything set up the way that I like it. I like using LOD1 just so, we get some good detail in there, but it's not too heavy in our scene. I'm going to use the basic format of FBX for my mesh, have it as a PNG for the textures, and the resolution is going to be 4K. And then for export to, I want to make sure I have Cinema 4D selected here. We have a whole plethora of different stuff in here. Like, of course, we can export to Unreal, Maya, Unity, Blender. But in this case, we want to export out to Cinema 4D. So down here in the lower right hand corner, I'm going to click export. And then up here, you're going to see export to Cinema 4D. And we just want to wait for it to say successful, like so. So now I can close this out. So for this rock, I went about negative 1954 by Y, which would be negative 37. And then for Z, 1524. And then for my X, Y, and Z, I definitely scaled this up a lot larger. So 15 by 15 by 15. And then for my rotation H, I'm going to do 90. And then for my rotation P, I'm going to do like 15.5. And that brings our rock quarry over here on the left-hand side. And then there's a cool trick also. We can make an instance of this. Like, we don't have to, make a copy of this. We can actually just come up here. You click on this right here, the array. And then you come over to instance. And what this is going to do, it kind of works like the cloner, where it's going to make an instance of this rock. So all I have to do is drag it. And if you look up here in the top right, we have an instance here. And this is really good for if you're going to render out of Cinema 4D, you have instance modes where you could use like render instance or multi-instance, which is a lot less expensive on your machine. But in this case, we must keep it at instance because this is the only thing that Unreal recognizes. So once we bring it into Unreal, if we use like multi-instance or render instance, it's actually just going to come in blank and it's not going to come through. You want to make sure you have it on instance and everything will translate over. So I'm just going to put this rock into its proper place. So again, I have my coordinates written down. So this one was about 1847 by negative 90 by 1384. And then of course 15, just going to keep that the same. And then for this, I'm going to do negative 84 by 0. So this gives me a good placeholder for my rock. So the next step from here is we're going to bring our camera in. We have everything blocked out, so we make sure our camera is not going to go through any walls or anything of that nature. And then from there, we're going to bring it into Unreal. Okay, so now I'm going to come up here and just click on the camera. And then I'm going to zero everything out like I always do. So I'll come over here on my coordinates tab, just click 0, tab 0, tab 0. And then the same thing for my rotation, zero everything out. Like so. So now I have my camera in direct center. And then I'm also going to add a null in here. This is one way that I like really animating my camera is adding like a null into my scene. Make sure that's 0 out. And then I want to have my camera always looking at my null so that I have like a point of interest that I can, I could kind of target on. And I know it's always going to be straight where it's supposed to be looking. So if I click on my camera here, the way to activate that is to come over to tags. And then I'm just going to scroll down here to animation tags and click on target. And then this will allow me to click on my null and just drag it in here where it says target object. And you can see my camera flipped, but what this is going to do is this is going to have my camera always looking at my null. So if I flip this around here and just start pulling it back, no matter where I have my camera, it's always looking at that null point, which is really, really good if we're doing like logo animations and we don't want to animate the rotation by hand. Sometimes it can get a little bit wonky and you don't want to have too many keyframes in there. My thing is I like using as least keyframes as possible and then just smoothing it out with the curve editor, and it always comes out pretty nice that way. So let me come over here. I'm just going to zero everything out. And then I'm going to come through and I'm just going to type in the coordinates that I started with. And so I think I started with negative 44 by 428, and then -22. And you can see as I'm typing in these coordinates, you can see it's handling the rotation here. So I don't need to put any keyframes here. I'm only going to put keyframes here on the position coordinates. So I'll make sure I'm on frame 0. And then I'm going to make a keyframe here. And then I'm going to come out to like 150-ish, somewhere around there. And then I'm going to have on my X position 0. And then on my Y, let's do like 295. And then on my Z, let's do -1100. You can see our camera's pulled back, and then let me make a keyframe here. And then I'm going to go all the way to the end. I'm just going to put a keyframe on my Z position, just maybe like 200 centimeters worth. So let me look through my camera and see what we have so far. Yeah, so you can see we're getting a pretty good camera move, but you can see we're not seeing exactly where we want to see, and that's because we're looking at the null, which is still at 0. So what I like to do now is I'm going to keyframe that null point so that it's looking where we want it to look. So I can actually go to our resolve frame at around like 150, and then I'm going to click on my null, and I'm just going to bring up the Y position to around like 309. There we go. So everything's nice and centered. And so I'm actually going to put a keyframe here, and then I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I'm actually going to make this 410 like so, because I really like the way that we were looking through the U, and I like the way we can see the back wall here and everything. So I'm going to put a keyframe there. So let me click play. And there we go. We have a nice cool camera move. We have a nice resolve. We have a nice pullback there at the end, so the camera just doesn't stop, and it's looking pretty dynamic if I had to say so myself. So now that we have a nice cool camera move in here, the next step is to bring this into an Unreal Engine. Like I said, I don't like bringing too many polygons into this scene. I kind of just like to block it out because I have it in my head exactly what I want. And so I'm going to bring it into Unreal. I'm going to go back to Megascans, really start populating this thing. And then we're going to add atmospheric fog. I'm going to go to the marketplace and show you guys what we really need to bring this thing to life. So before we bring this stuff over into Unreal, there's a few things that we need to make sure we have set. So we want to come over to File. Actually, we want to come over to Edit and come down to Preferences. And then I'm going to click on Files down here if you don't have it clicked already. And right here where it says Save Polygons for Cineware and Save Animation for Cineware, we want to make sure that we have these clicked because we're going to be saving our project for Cineware. So once we have these check marked, click on that. And if you're using version S22, you're going to have to hit Control D. And it's going to be underneath the Cineware tab that's here. And then you'll just have to make sure you have the same things checked on. They just moved it when we got the S22, but it's the same exact things there. So whenever you're ready to save this out for Unreal, click on File, come down here, Save Project for Cineware, or if you're using version R20 and before, it's going to be called Save Project for Melange. Same exact thing, just named differently. So I'm going to click on this, Save Project for Cineware. And then I'm just going to find where I want to save it at. And so what I'm going to do is just name this one Unreal Tutorial. And then what I like to do is do _UE4. And the reason I like doing this is because it's going to make a Cinema 4D project for us. And so the file is going to be a .c4 extension. And so the way that I like to keep things organized, anything that's going to Unreal, I'll always _UE4. And that way I know, okay, these files are going to be used for Unreal. And then the ones without UE4 are the ones that I'm going to be using just for Cinema 4D. Those are my original files. So I'm going to click on Save here. And it depends on how big your scene is. Sometimes you'll see a low bar down here if it's really large, but our scene is pretty basic here. And so the next step from here is we're going to open up Unreal Engine. And so now we have the Epic's launcher opened up. So the first thing I want to do from here is come over to Library. And then I'm just going to launch a new scene here. So I'm using version 4.25, which is the latest one right now. So you just want to click this and make sure everything's going to run. So once you hit launch Unreal, you're going to come up with this Unreal project browser. So what I want to do is come down to here where it says film, television, and live events, click next. And then I'm just going to start with a blank slate, click next again. If you have something that has ray tracing, you can enable it here from the start. And then I'm just going to leave this as is. And then down here for my project, let's just name this Unreal_tutorial. Go to click create project here. So now we have our Unreal Engine open. There's a few things that I want to do here from the get. So down here where it says new plugins are available, if you downloaded any type of plugins or anything, this is usually going to come up. So I usually just hit dismiss. And then down here, your project is out of date. Just click update and everything should be good. And so I already have this enabled by my default. I actually have a tutorial which I can link you guys to on how to permanently enable this. But if you don't have the Datasmith plugin here, what you need to do is come over to settings, come down to plugins, and then right here where it says built-in, you're just going to want to type in C4D. So if this is your first time using Unreal, or if you don't have this permanently enabled, this is going to be turned off by default. So all you're going to have to do is click it and enable it. And then it's going to ask you to restart Unreal, which usually just takes a couple of seconds. So you click that, you'll see something down here that says restart Unreal. You'll click that to restart it. And then once it's done being restarted, this is what your top bar is going to look like. And so we need the Datasmith plugin to be able to bring in that Cinema 4D file that we had talked about before that we exported. But first, I'm going to delete some stuff here that's in our default panel. So I'm going to take this ground plane and delete this. Then I'm going to take this player start and delete this. Probably going to take the sky sphere, delete this as well. So I'm basically just going to leave in, I think, our light source, our sky. Actually, I'm going to delete the skylight because I'm going to use the HDR, and then sphere reflection. I can actually leave this one in here. So basically, I'm just going to leave these two items here. And then I'm going to click on content browser. You can see it's blank. We just have our main stage in here in our registry. So now we're ready to import our Cinema 4D files. So if I come over to Datasmith, click this, then I'm just going to find where I have my file at. So I'm going to come down to C4D and this one right here, Unreal Tutorial _ UE4. Click on open, and then I'm just going to click my content folder, click OK. And then I'm going to leave everything checked on here because I want to bring everything from Cinema to Unreal. But say like you have a case where you just want to bring in your camera, or you just want to bring in certain geometries, you can click those on so you don't have to keep bringing in these large files. So right now, I'm just going to click import, leave it all at default. This should go pretty fast. There we go. So now we have our scene already in Unreal Engine. You can see we have all of our parts in place here. We have our rocks here. We have our logo here. And you notice right here where it says lighting needs to be rebuilt. What I usually do is come up to my light source. And I'm just going to make it movable. So we're using dynamic lighting, and we should be good to go there. And so if we want to see how our animation is playing out, we just have to come down here into this animation folder that was brought in, double click on this. And this is going to bring up your sequencer, which is kind of like how our animation tab is in Cinema 4D. So if I double click on this, it's going to open up the sequencer tab. And if it doesn't open up the tab, it's as easy as going up to Windows, come down to cinematic, and then you can find a sequencer here as well. So if I come down to my sequencer and start playing through this, you can see that all of our pieces are animating as is, but we're not looking through our camera, which is an easy fix. I can either come up to perspective, and I like to look through the cinematic viewport because that's going to be what like realistically our render is going to look like. So I'm going to click on this, then click back on perspective again, and come down to camera. Now if I click play, and the cool thing about, if you come down to cinematic viewport, it actually adds our timeline controls down here as well. So I can actually click play from here. And there we go. Now we have our Cinema 4D move. We have our MoGraph move. We didn't use too many keyframes in there, but everything is looking nice and slick in here. So now you see the basic steps on how I built this scene out. And so I'm going to actually show you guys the final version of it, just run through some quick tips through here. And then I'm going to show you guys real-time rendering. I'm going to render this out, show you how I bring my stuff into After Effects. And then we're going to wrap it all up with some BorisFX from there. So this is the final scene, which I'm going to make available for you guys if you want to kind of backwards engineer it. But let me click on something in here. Click the G tab so we can kind of see everything in its glory. So if I come over here, perspective, cinematic viewport, come down to my camera, then I'm just going to click play. So now you can see how everything is moving. If I export, all right, so I could go freely around the scene. You can kind of see how I have everything built out here. And so I just have a bunch of those rock clips from Megascans. I just brought them in, click and drag some stuff in, just how we brought it into Cinema 4D. It's going to bring it into a raw outliner. From there, you just click and drag it into the scene and just start placing them around. And then the way that I got this vegetation in here, if I come over to modes and then come down to foliage, you can see that I have some foliage imported here from Megascans. And so let me give you a quick demo of how to use it. So if I click on, say like these right here, I believe these are all my ferns. So I'm just going to activate them. And now you can see I have like this dome here, and this is actually my paintbrush. So I can actually come over here to size and bring this down a little bit. And let me zoom in to maybe around here. So if all I have to do is click and just drag, And now I'm able to paint the foliage in there. And if I want to find like foliage for the scene, it's as easy as going over to Quixel Bridge. And then once I'm inside a bridge, I could just type in any type of vegetation or even plants. So if you come over here, which is 3D plants, you would click on this, and then everything here is just going to be able to be used in Unreal like I did there. So let me actually type in fern so you guys can see exactly which one I have. So I'm using this one right here, the common fern. And then you would just come over here to your export settings, come down to export to, click on Unreal, and then as long as you have everything installed, you would just click export from here, and then it's automatically going to bring it into this right here. And from there, it's as easy as just taking it and just kind of navigating around your scene and just painting your ferns in like so. And then another cool thing that I wanted to show you guys, let me actually go back to my select here. Then I'm going to go through, look through my camera. Okay, another cool thing that I want to show you guys is the LUT pack. So let me click on this camera so I can see my 16.9 view like that. And then if I come over here, my post-process volume, if I type in LUT in here, you can see we actually have under color grading, we have a tab for LUT here. So let me turn this off so you can just see what's going on. So this is what it looks like without the LUT pack there. And if I come over to my content browser, click on the content folder, I have that amplified LUT pack in here. And if I double click on this, this is the full version, but like I said, you could download the free version that have 4 LUTs in there. But if you just want to see how it works, like if I come to maybe like film color and just grab one of these and drag it in there. So this one says soft old footage, click and drag. That doesn't look too great. Let me click on Jurassic. So you can see how the LUT is actually changing the color space on our scene here. Let me see if I can find something a little bit more exuberant. So let me come over to popular looks, Blockbuster 10. There we go. Something like that's looking really cool. Just click and drag these in so you can really see how this is really changing the dynamic of our scene. So it's pretty cool that we could do color correction within Unreal as well. And if I click on the X here, and then I'm just going to scroll down, we can actually look and see that we have a tab for color correcting as well. So if you want to come in here and just kind of play around with the different shadows, midtones, highlights, the gamma, you have complete control over that as well. So let's say my scene is great. I have everything the way that I like it. I have the fireflies, which was from the marketplace as well. I just clicked and dragged them in there, left everything at default, and everything's good. So now let's say that I'm ready to render this out. All I have to do is come over to my sequencer, make sure I have this camera cuts track in here. And if I don't have it, let me turn this off. Actually, I'll delete it so I can show you guys how to do it. So I'm going to delete this, make sure I'm on frame 0, and then come over here where it says track, and I'm going to add a camera cut track. And then from here, I'm just going to click on camera, then find my camera that I'm using in my scene. And now you can see it adds this track in here, in which that means now we can properly render this out. So from here, I'm going to come up to window, come down to cinematics, and do movie render queue. I'm going to click on this, and this brings up the render movie queue, which is brand new for version 4.25, which gives us a pretty easy setup to be able to set up some high quality renders. So if I want to render, I'm going to click on this green tab here, and then I'm going to find the scene that I want. Like I have 2 different sequences here. One is the short one, 8-second, and then I have like an extended one that I was just using for online. But I'm just going to click on this one here. I believe it's around 500 frames. Then under settings, I'm going to click on unsave config. And then from here, I'm going to actually render out an EXR. So I'm going to delete the JPEG. This is all brand new for right now. So I would expect this stuff is going to, have more options in the future. But for now, we could click on EXR sequence, which is 16-bit. I'm going to click on my output. Then I'm just going to find a folder, which I can render all this stuff. So let me come to here, make a new folder. I'm just going to name it pre-renders. And then double click in here and make another folder and name it main, because I'm going to show you guys how I do render passes. So I'm going to select folder, and then I'm just going to leave everything else at default. 1920 1080 is fine for this example. I'm going to click accept, and then from here it's as easy as just click and render. And this is the coolest part that I really like showing people, the real-time rendering. Usually when I'm using offline renders, this stuff can take like, 2 to 3 to 4 minutes and above per frame. But you can see I'm talking to you guys, and this thing is moving pretty quick. Like if I look over here on the right, you can see the frame count is just flying. So I have a 500 frame sequence running at 60 frames per second, and everything is just flying. So I'm just going to wait for this to finish out. We just have a couple of more frames here. and everything is final. So now we have our sequence. If I go to my Explorer here and kind of look for where I saved it at, there we go. So we have an EXR sequence, which we can later just bring into After Effects and start, playing around and manipulating and adding whatever plugins that we kind of want to use to just, like drive everything home. So if I want to, if I want to just use that should be fine. But I do like rendering out render passes as well. And so we could use the old rendering method to get like ambient occlusion and scene depth out of here. So if I come back down to my sequencer, click on this little clipboard here. This is actually the old method of rendering out cinematics in Unreal. I always use the new method because it's a lot more intuitive and it gives us a cleaner render. But for render passes, I usually use this because we don't have render passes in the new method yet. So you just have to work with what you have. So I'm going to come down here to custom render passes. Then over here, I'm just going to make my resolution match 1920 by 1080. And then right here where it says render passes, I'm actually going to render out ambient occlusion. But you can see we have some cool passes in here. The ones I usually render out is ambient occlusion. And I like to do scene depth because I like using scene depth just so I have a Z depth pass for if I want to manipulate anything in After Effects, I have that capability to do so. Then I'm going to come down here to general where it says output directory. I'm going to make another folder and I'm just going to name this one passes. And select this folder. And then there's actually one more thing that I want to do. I want to click on this down arrow here. And right here where it says use separate process, this is something that I learned in the forums. It usually gives us a cleaner render whenever we use this old method. And so from here, I'm just going to click capture movies. I'm going to hit save selected and make sure you save everything before you render. And then down here in the lower right hand corner, you'll see like this little icon saying capture a movie. It's going to open up another window and then it's just going to capture. Sometimes the window, it's going to look something like this. This is why I like the new method because we can actually see everything in play. But with the old method, sometimes you're just going to see, like a scene like this. But don't worry, as long as in the lower right hand corner, it says capture in video, we should be good. So we're just going to wait for this to finish out and then we're going to bring everything into After Effects. So now I have After Effects open. I have everything brought in here. I just want to show you guys a quick overview of what I did to get everything to look the way that it did in the final project. And so if I click through here, like I have everything imported, they're all at 60 FPS. I added the levels to my main one here, like so, just to kind of give it a little bit more life and contrast in there. And then from there, I brought in my ambient occlusion. I'm just going to click this on and off so you can see how much shadow is adding into the crevices and stuff. And if I click on the T on my keyboard, you can actually see I brought my opacity down. So I added some levels to it just to crunch it a little bit. I brought the opacity down because if I bring it all the way up, that looks pretty disgusting there. So I just wanted to add a little bit of shadow in there. I probably could have went a little bit lighter, maybe even 10, somewhere of that nature. And then down here, you can see I actually have a pre-comp, which if I double click on this is my Z depth pass. So if I click on here, I added levels to this as well. Like this is what rendered out of Unreal. And I just wanted to crunch it a little bit so that I could actually have like more control over it when I'm using some of the Sapphire plugins. And so I added crunch here. And the reason that I added levels to this in here and have it inside of a pre-comp is because if you add if you want to use this for any type of plugins, you can't have it in your main comp, or actually it's not going to recognize the levels on there. So you have to put it into its own pre-comp and then bring that pre-comp into your main composition here. So if I click back here, you can see we have our Z depth pass, and I can leave it off because I just have it underneath here. And so I'm just going to go through the different plugins that I'm using. I'm using a lot of Sapphire plugins, and if you want to follow along with this example, you can actually download a free trial off the BorisFX website. So the first one I'm using, I really like a lot, is the Z depth fog, which is the Z fog exponential. You can see right off the bat, as soon as I turn that on, it really brought a lot of life to my scene here. And I changed the fog color to like a little brownish tint because I wanted to, I was really pulling a lot of inspiration here from like Tomb Raider and Indiana Jones. And so I made this a little bit brighter. For my Z buffer type, I have black as near because inside of my scene depth here, if I click this on, you can see everything in the foreground is going to be black and everything in the background is going to be white. And so the next one I want to do is my depth pass, which is another Sapphire plugin. It's the Z defocus. You can see as I turn this on and off, you can see that it's giving us a nice depth of field. We can actually add depth of field inside of Unreal, but I just like doing it in After Effects because I can really drive it home. And just, you know, I like working more in like an abstract and stylized mode. So this allows me all that flexibility to do so. And I can also click on this load preset here. So in this particular case, we just have 3. I believe I use this one here, the light luminous defocus. And then from there, I just kind of go through the attributes and kind of play around with these. Of course, Z buffer type, I'm always going to have black is near. And then moving on to the next one. This one is actually a lens flare, which is self-explanatory. If you click on load, we're going to have a whole bunch of lens flares to pick from, which I just use one of the presets on there. And then this one is the really cool one. This is the vignette. So if I turn this on, you can see this is really what stylized it and makes it look really dynamic and cool. So if I come back to load preset again, I didn't even know Vignette had presets before, but when I was just playing around trying to get the right tone and color correction and everything in here, I clicked on the preset just to kind of see what Vignette had, and I was kind of blown away at all the different options here. So if I start clicking around on these, you can see that we're getting some pretty cool options in here. Some of them, oh, I really like that one there. It looks like we have light coming from behind the cliff here. I should have used that one, but the one that I used was down here called Warm Centre, and I still really dig this look too. So I was able to click on this and just click load from there, and that gives us the cool look that we have here. And I don't believe I messed with anything here except for the color. I just made it browner in tone just to kind of match everything that I was going for. And then right here, I'm actually using the Sapphire cartoon paint just to kind of add a little bit of the accent around here. So if I click load preset on this one, if I come down here, I'm using this one called Van Gogh by John Dickinson, and it's giving us like this cool like warp look like a Van Gogh painting. And I just wanted to add a little bit of something in there. Like I like the way that this looks around the edges, but I didn't want to make it too heavy. So if I click on this, click T, I actually just brought the transparency down to like by 6. But if I scroll this up, maybe let's do around like 50. I mean, we're starting to get a pretty cool look in here, so I could probably add more than 6. Maybe something like 25 looks pretty cool. I didn't want it to overpower it too much, and so yeah, something like 10 I like really a lot, because I mean, we're still getting kind of like those paint strokes in there. We're still keeping some of the, you know, abstract realism that we have in our scene here, and it looks pretty cool. So I just like playing around with these different plugins that I have at my disposal. And then the last but not least, we have chromatic apparition, which is self-explanatory. Same thing. We could have did this in Unreal as well, but I usually like to just do stuff in After Effects just to really, you know, be able to dial it in and get it the way that I want to look. So hopefully this video helped you guys out. And again, I want to give a big thank you to EpicGans for sponsoring this video. I'm going to make this project file 100% free for you guys. So you make sure you look in the description down below or in the comment section, and I'll leave a link to where you can download it at. And as always, if you're new to the channel, make sure you click that subscribe button. Give me a big thumbs up. And as always, stay fresh, keep creating, and I'll catch you in the next video. I'll see you soon. Take care.